I asked you guys a few weeks ago what song you'd like to see next, and you chose Travis Scott's Sicko Mode. So this is that video. Today we'll be going through all 3 beats from the song, and if you want to see one in particular, I will leave timestamps in the description below. These are all the producers of this song, taken from Genius.com, with additional production, mixing, and mastering from Mike Dean. Let's jump into the first beat. This is the main synth behind the song. You can find this preset inside of Kontakt. It's the Rapman Wow, and this is what it sounds like without any filters. The first thing we're doing is going to Master Effects and turning on Cabinet, and the effect that we're using is Al Nicho. We're adding Parametric EQ2, then Guitar Rig 5 to give it this sort of guitar effect. So we're bringing some more high end into it. If we have a look at the stereo separation of the original sample, we can see that it's very central, but it also pulses as the sound plays. So I added Maximus and I created an automation clip, and we're automating the stereo separation so that it pulses. The next thing we're doing is adding this bass melody. The melody is C, G, C, then A sharp, F, A sharp. In doing research for this video, I found this preset inside of Reverb Machine's blog. You should check out this blog if you want a more in-depth look into how to make this bass sound. I made some slight changes to the filter cutoff and the filter attack, but it was super accurate. Then we have this really soft piano and harp sound that you hear in the song. Another really good preset from Reverb Machine, and we're also using this grand piano that you can find inside of Keyscape. So altogether it sounds like this. This plays for 8 bars and then it switches up. That's the chord progression from Kontakt, and the harp is playing the same chord progression. Then we have our final bass preset coming in. Again from Reverb Machine, just because he nailed that sound, and I'll leave his website in the description below. All we're doing for this one is EQing some of the high ends. Then we have the descending snare, which is the exact same snare that was used in his song. This is an 808 Mafia snare, and we're cloning the snare to add a second voice and make the snare sound longer. To add this second voice to the sound, we're dragging the second snare sample out a few note intervals. Then we're adding some transient processor and some EQ. Then since we have some EQs and some stereo separation on the master, we're turning all that off and we're exporting the drum samples. For the 808, we're using the TM808. Playing with the 808, we have the rack kick. These 2 shakers coming in. We have a few different snare samples. Some hi-hats. And this 808 Mafia clap. So from here, we're adding the track stems into this new project. That's what it sounds like, and it ends pretty abruptly. From there, we're coming into the second part. If you're interested in how to remake Sicko Mode, you've probably seen this video on how OZ deconstructed the song. You might have seen this video on YouTube. It's playing an Instagram live from OZ, but the problem is it's in German. So to solve that problem, I went onto Fiverr and I actually hired a German translator to translate that section. And you know what? I'm gonna give that to you today. So this is the translation. You can read that for yourself if you're interested, but we'll be going through the main points in this song. You can see my CPU isn't handling FL Studio as well as recording at the same time. So what you can do is go into Tools, Macros, and switch Smart Disable for all plugins. So that turns off any unnecessary plugins. Then we can go to Project and decrease the time base. This will save some CPU. The first thing that we learned from the OZ deconstruction is that he uses a Cubeats sample. We're chopping up the sample and editing it to sound like this. This section here is creating some ambience. And this is all being sidechained by the kick. Then we're adding in the Sicko Mode 808, which is also being sidechained by the kick. The kick that we're using here is the Backett kick, which you can see is very similar to the original sample. And the reason why we're layering it twice is because the stereo separation for this kick is very small. So we're adding in a second version of it where we've swapped the stereo. You can see a really big difference in the stereo separation of the kick when you see only one of them playing versus both of them. We've done the same thing with the vocal sample, swapping one of the stereos, as you can see here. There are actually two 808s playing in this song. This is the main one that you'll notice. And this is the second 808 that plays. And you'll notice at the end it plays with this rack kick. Then we have these hi-hats. A bunch of different OZ hi-hats which you can filter to sound basically identical. Then we move into the song. The second thing you can learn from the OZ breakdown is this little plucking sound. I couldn't find the exact preset that he used, and trust me, I looked for ages. For this sound, we're going into Repro 5 and we're using the Bellina preset, and we're just turning off some of the filters and making some slight changes to the synth. Then he added this Vox sound, which I couldn't find, so I went onto Splice and found some other Vox sounds and then filtered them to sound basically the same. So this sound isn't identical, but it's pretty close. And it plays this melody. And that fits in really nicely here. The one thing I didn't add to this remake was this sound that he had from Massive, because I don't have Massive. But if you find the preset, let me know in the comments below what that preset was. Then he said he reversed the Cubeats sample, which I did up here. The last thing he added was this snare. That's pretty much everything, apart from at the end when we add in this vocal sample from a song I forget. I'll let you know down there.
Don't stop, pump that music.
And that's it, so on to the next beat. The first thing we're doing is adding the rack kick, which you can see is identical just looking at the waveforms. Then we have the snare slash clap. And again with the snare, you can see it in the waveform. It just matches pretty nicely. Then we're adding in the 21 hi-hat. Here we're adding transient processor and we're bringing down the attack, and then we're adding some EQs. So together it sounds like this. Then we're adding in this pad, which was made using Omnisphere and Repro 5. The presets we're using are SodaStream bells, this synth that I made on Repro 5, and finally we're using this Omnisphere preset called Ambient Cathedral Drops. Playing together like this. Then finally we have the Tay Keith riser. Then during what I'm going to call the pre-chorus, we have a few other different synths playing. After watching Tay Keith's Deconstructed on Genius, we can see he likes to use Nexus a lot. So I went into Nexus and found the identical synth, which is the PD Signpad 1. This is what it sounds like. And you can see we've added gross beat and put on halftime. And we're also adding a bit of Maximus to bring up the stereo separation. Also, if you listen closely to the song, you'll hear some strings, and this is the string melody. Then we have the sub. Everyone knows and loves this preset after Metro Boomin championed it in one of his interviews. It's the Prid sidechain bass. So altogether it sounds like this. Then in the drop we have this 808 that plays at the same time as the kick. This is the 2016 Lex Luger 808, and it sounds like this in context. So just a quick recap, we have beat number 1, followed by beat number 2,